If you're studying for boards or getting ready to study for boards and you're telling yourself, I'm just going to push through, I hate this, but I'm just going to push through, this can actually make your anxiety worse. I've seen this happen to many high achievers. Hi, I'm Dr. Bianca Bush. I'm an adult, child, and adolescent psychiatrist, board certified, and I love encouraging fellow physicians, medical students, residents as they tackle big anxiety provoking high stakes exams. So, today, we're going to think about this, pushing through and what's actually happening. We're going to look through the peak performance lens, like athletes. We're going to look through a psychological lens, and we're also going to look through a trauma lens. So, if you're preparing for boards at any point this year, this time, subscribe, follow along. I really am here to encourage you. It's my goal to encourage 5,000 folks this year. So, join me. Let's get started. We are going to start with reason number one, thinking about things through the peak performance lens. So let's put ourselves into the mindset of an athlete, someone who is training. I mean, we're sort of like athletes in the way that we've trained for years and years and years. We're training our minds. If we are in a field where we're using our hands in surgery, we're training our hands as surgeons, right? So athletes, they don't train at max intensity daily, right? They might use a model like stress the system, the body, recover, adapt. And as we know, as scientists, biologists, that when you stress those muscles, once they have time to rest and recover, they're growing. They're getting bigger and stronger, right? It's not at the time that you're lifting, right? We know that's when the muscle fibers are tearing, they're breaking apart. And then as they recover, that's when they get stronger. Well, if we can think about our minds, cognitive performance follows the same biological laws, right? So again, let's compare to the athletes. Elite runners, they taper before race day. You might also be an elite runner, even as you're a physician or a medical professional, right? I know, I've run marathons, half marathons, that you are not running the entire 13 miles the day before the race. You're not running the entire 20.26, point two. You may never even get there, right? You're going to taper before the rest day or before the race day so that your body has time to recover. NBA players have recovery days. Olympic training blocks are, they're put into certain periods. So let's see how that applies to us preparing for boards. Boards are not a 6-month sprint to the red line or to the finish line, right? That would be like going the full distance before a race. NBA players not taking any recovery days, right? We've got to think about training our minds and our cognitions in similar ways to athletes. So if we just push through, we don't take time to rest, we don't take time to recover, our cortisol levels stay elevated, our sleep can potentially worsen. We know we need to rest. Our mind needs rest so that it can consolidate those memories, all of that knowledge that we're learning and putting in place. This can lead to our error rates increasing as we're going through those questions in the Q banks. And so then we move from productive stress to chronic stress. That's crazy. Let's think about that. So if we are taxing our minds, but then giving it time to rest, just like athletes tax their muscles and give them time to rest, that's productive stress. But if it's chronic, over and over again, you're not allowing yourself to rest. Like imagine if an athlete was just lifting every day, every day, every day. And we might even see this with people who are using different anabolic steroids or that kind of thing, right? They are training their body to ignore when they're stressed, when their muscles are tired, when their muscles are sore, and they're like, ugh! Just picture this guy or girl totally jacked in the gym and they're just going to push through. No, that's bad. That's chronic stress. We know that's going to lead to muscle breakdown, tears, irreparable damage. Well, what if we think about that for our minds? Chronic stress. When I work with folks, they might say, oh, my test is 9 months away. I want to get studying now. And I actually don't often advise that. I say, let's take a break. Let's rest. And let's work in some rest along the way. Maybe you're going to study for 6 months if you need it. Maybe you're going to study for 3 months. But let's take some rest along the way. So The academic concept this is comparable to is allostatic load. We know that when there's too much, we have neurocognitive fatigue, like that jacked person in the gym, and our brains just cannot function as well as they would under circumstances when we're rest. That means our executive function is depleted. That means our reasoning skills are depleted. That means that our attention narrows. We need as much attention as we can get for these exams because we know they are 6 hours long, 8 hours long. If we're thinking about USMLE, maybe it's 2 days long, right? So we need all of the attention time that we can get. So performance isn't about maximum effort, but it's about strategic effort. Maybe on that test day you were giving max effort, but along the way, we're being strategic, we're getting what we need to get in. We're resting so that on test day, like race day, we're ready to go like an athlete. Let's get into reason number two. Let's think about psychological recovery. And it's required, right? We need time, not just cognitively, but for our emotions to recover. Working memory is finite. It's not something that you can just tap into forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And when anxiety increases, worry, stress, our cognitive bandwidth shrinks. I just had this kind of thought, right? When you're on a Zoom or any kind of streaming, you want to increase bandwidth. How do you do that? You close tabs. You close tabs out, right? So that you can have more bandwidth in your internet so you get a better connection. Well, let's think about our working memory, our cognition, right? We have to have the bandwidth for it. So pushing through is allowing that internal noise to that anxiety to remain, right? We're not quieting it. So that decreases bandwidth, right? So when we push through, we're really ignoring the internal signals. We're trying to suppress our distress. And suppression really is going to increase psychological arousal. So think about that. If we're like, oh God, I'm so stressed, I'm just going to push it down. I'm just going to push it down. Can we actually push it down? What's going to happen? You might remain either precipitate, exacerbate, or remain in the state of physiological arousal, right? That's our flight or fight system. I talk about it all the time. And so this reinforces our fear conditioning around studying. Have you had the experience where you have had a bad practice test or had a bad exam and you're like, okay, I'm just going to push through and your body reacts, right? Well, this is what we're talking about. We're reinforcing that fear conditioning. And so what's happening is like different things around you become cues for threats or for that fight or flight response. So you sit down at your desk and you're like, why are my palms sweating? You're like, oh yeah, because I feel anxious. I feel upset about that 40% that I got on my Q bank yesterday, right? This can lead to avoidance. Have you had the experience where you need to do another Q block, but because you did so poorly the day before or a few days before, you're just avoiding it? You got those negative thoughts that are starting, and you're like, oh, God, it's probably going to be a 40% again. Like, am I going to do any better? I don't know. I'm just going to avoid it. I'll get to it tomorrow, right? So that's another response. Shame can increase. Rumination increases. Rumination, just going over and over again, right? You're going through those questions. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? Am I going to do it again? And you're just thinking, thinking, thinking. And one thing I want to point out as psychiatrist, the reason why I love this work, this is a great book. A lot of people think about trauma, and actually, our third point is trauma. But just thinking about how the physical space becomes a cue our body kind of remembers. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. But what's most important is to remember that you might have these responses, but that recovery, so taking the time to get out of that response, isn't indulgent, but it's regulatory. It's a way of regulating your body, right? It's activating the parasympathetic system, which is going to counter the sympathetic. This is going to allow us to process. This is going to allow us to consolidate memories. And we'll do this, as we're resting during sleep and even when we're not sleeping, right? So that's thinking about a psychological recovery, taking time to deal with the emotion that is happening as you sit down to do the test, thinking about self-compassion for yourself as you're going through and you're tackling this huge, huge, huge thing, right? Having to recall all of this knowledge that we have learned over many years. Let's think about things from a trauma lens. Number 3, and this is going to resonate deeply. This is when I should be bringing this book up. This is going to resonate deeply with physicians who failed exams. That's me. It's part of why I'm here, right? And so if you've failed a step exam, if you failed boards, if you felt the humiliation of it, right? And in other videos, I've talked about my experience failing step and what that means, and you're off cycle. That can be really embarrassing, right? So you have a lot of shame, humiliation. You might even start to feel your identity collapse, right? Am I the doctor who I say I am? Am I smart? Can I be a doctor? When you fail, a lot of the times you start to have those questions, right? Am I really that girl or am I not? The nervous system encodes that. And that's why I was thinking about this book and I grabbed it off the shelf, is because the nervous system, the body, remembers this experience and all these feelings. And in my clinical work, I really like to help people expand their concept and idea of what a trauma is. A lot of the times we think about trauma as a lot of the big, bad, scary mistreatment kinds of things. But at the core, a trauma is an experience that catches you off guard, that is unexpected. It can be defined sometimes as something that threatens your life, but failing a board exam can count as a trauma. You may think that sounds silly. Some of you actually may feel like that's validating, and I hope you do, but that can definitely count as a trauma. I mean, think about all that surrounds failing an exam. You've put in time to study, you've paid, you've taken time off of work or out of your schedule, you've made arrangements with family, friends, partner, right? There's all this big buildup, and you're expecting to pass, and then you don't. Oh, that can be devastating. It can be downright traumatic, right? And so the nervous system encodes that. The body remembers it. And that's what the name of this book is. This body keeps the score. And so if you have failed an exam, you might have the experience that when you try to get back into studying, your body has a response reaction. I mentioned that sweaty palms. Maybe your mind is racing. Maybe it goes blank because your body is remembering that trauma. And so now we have our you world questions. It's a threat cue, right? Sending your body into this trauma response. Practice exams could be a trigger. And so pushing through is actually re-exposing yourself to the trauma. And we wouldn't, in the healing process from a trauma, we wouldn't recommend that you do that in great abundance, right? When we work through trauma, we'll do exposures very gradually, very carefully. But if you're just going right back in, that would be almost what we call flooding in the world of psychology or psychiatry. And so we really want to think about how do we add some healing, some regulation, so that when we have to take this test again, it's not automatically triggering the trauma response, or if it is, we know what to do. And so just to go back to some of the neuroscience, what is happening here, when you're re-exposing yourself without having regulation or skills or tools, you're strengthening the amygdala activation, right? That's our fear center. You're bypassing the prefrontal cortex. That's where we make all of our sound, reasonable decisions. And you're thinking, how do I survive? How do I survive? Right? And again, it might sound like, isn't it that serious? It's just a board exam, but it's that serious in your body. And I know there's someone that's listening that is like, yeah, it's that serious. You're going to reinforce the avoidance circuits, right? We talked about that before when we were talking about preparing like a professional athlete. You might say, okay, this is too much, this is too much, this is too much. I'm not even going to do it. Maybe it delays you taking your exam for months, maybe even years, right? So all of this stuff can lead to your memory retrieval declining, making your decision making is worse, having blank out episodes, right? These are all trauma responses. And so we have to think about this, we have to recognize it and do something about it, because you can't out discipline a dysregulated nervous system. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. You cannot out discipline or out hustle a dysregulated nervous system. All right, so I've told you why it's a bad idea to just like push through, to just hustle through. And so now I'm going to tell you 3 things that you can do instead. 1, I want you to have strategic recovery blocks. Just like an athlete, NBA players have their days off. Elite runners are going to take it easy the day before a rest. I want you to do maybe a 50 to 90-minute study block and then take 10 to 20 minutes of complete disengagement. Take a step back. Maybe you're scrolling socials. I like to get on Pinterest. Sometimes I color when I'm studying or I need to take a break. I'll even do this now when I'm working on my clinical work. Get that solid time in and then take a few minutes back, 10 to 20 minutes. You might think about a once weekly half day reset, right? When I'm working with people on setting up schedules for studying in my coaching physicians, they'll say, okay, I want to study 7 days a week. And I say, hold on. Let's think about something that is realistic, doable, and let's work in some rest. So maybe a half day isn't reasonable, but maybe a couple of hours is. But let's work that in. Let's put that into the schedule. By the way, I have an awesome Notion planning template for your board studies. I used it the last time I took boards for my child and adolescent psychiatry boards. I passed, but I used it to organize myself, and I put in that intentional rest time. I put in days for catch up. So anyway, I'll link it below. Grab it, use it. Let me know if you like it. I loved it. I feel like it helped me pass. So anyway, schedule that in. And then protecting your sleep, right, as a non-negotiable, because we need that time, consolidate memories, rest, like the bodybuilder is lifting, right? Our muscles, they need time to rest so that muscle tissues, those fibers can repair, right? All right, so we can call this like a periodized or periodic board prep. And then ask yourself as you're doing it, is this, as you're putting things in place, is this a growth session or is this a depletion session? And let that guide you as you're figuring out how to put in recovery blocks. Number 2, regulate before you re-engage. And this is from the psychology lens, right? This is, I'm a psychiatrist. So before you start studying, I love this, I practice it with people, before you even sit down to go over your content, start that Q bank, I want you to take 5 minutes to do some diaphragmatic breathing, right? Because we know when we do that, we know our anatomy, that vagus nerve, it's by the diaphragm. And so when we activate that diaphragm, we're going to activate the vagus nerve. We're going to activate the parasympathetic, right? So take a few minutes, do some box breathing, 4 sides, and then you'll be ready to get in the game. While you're doing that, I want you to name the fear that you have as you're getting ready to engage with that material. Neuro, always hard for me. So I might have said to myself, all right, neuro's coming up. It's often challenging for me, but today I'm going to work at understanding these concepts so that I can execute on test day, right? I'm talking myself up, right? And we're going to reframe it. We're going to reframe also, right? That what you're going to learn today, the Q bank, if you get 40%, it's data. It's just telling us that we need to prepare more, but it's not who we are. So if you get a 30%, you get a 40%, get a 50%, doesn't mean that I'm a bad doctor. Doesn't mean that I'm not prepared. It just means that I got to dig a little bit deeper into that material, or I got to think about why they asked that question or how they asked that question, right? Okay. And number 3, this is the third tip. How are we going to not just push through? We're going to do some trauma-informed studying. So if boards feel traumatic or you've had a traumatic experience with boards, let's think about a gradual exposure instead of diving right in and flooding our nervous system, right? So what does that mean? Gradual exposure. Okay. You're so many months out from the test. Literally, this could mean just setting, pretend this is content review, a book. Maybe you just set it on your desk. Maybe you don't even open it up. I'm talking baby steps, y'all. Baby steps. And this is exactly what I do with my patients when we're doing exposure, right? We'll come up with an exposure hierarchy and we'll go from there. But start with something small. Maybe you put it on your desk. Maybe the next day you just open it up. You don't even start studying. Okay. Maybe the third day or however many days after, you go through a page. So you see that's bit by bit by bit so that you're not flooding yourself. Start with easier question sets. Start with a topic that you know you've got, right? That's going to boost your confidence. I would not start with neuro if it was me because that's not my best stuff, right? Study in safe, neutral environments. So make your space feel good, cozy. Put the things that you like around. Pictures of family, friends, stuff that you love. Maybe you've got a picture on your desktop of the place that you're going after you finish your test. Pair your studying with safety cues. Good lighting, good music. Maybe you light a candle. Maybe you make sure you have good posture. I love to study to particular playlists that just make me feel good and I might sing along. Now, some optional things that you can do if you are really having an intense traumatic reaction to this, think about a treatment called EMDR. Think about somatic work, and I would encourage you to get in touch with a licensed professional to explore these. And also think about performance coaching. That's something that I offer. You can find it on the website, testanxiety.com, testanxietynomore.com. So the goal is to teach your nervous system that studying is safe again, that a big trauma is not going to happen. All right, so we've talked about a lot today. Boards are not just this like academic event. They really end up feeling like it's about your identity. And so pushing through feels like you're being strong, you're being tough, you've got this, but being strategic about how you're regulated and how you approach it is going to lead to it's a stronger approach, is going to lead to a better outcome. So I want you to think to yourself, where are you over relying on force to just get through? Excuse me. Do you see that anywhere where you're over relying on force? Another question, where do you need recovery? Have you planned a 4-hour block of study with 2 breaks or 1 break? Maybe you need to add 1 or 2 more in, right? For that 50-minute, 10-minute, 50-minute, 10-minute, right? Where do you need recovery? All right. So if you are interested in getting more support, let me know. I'm going to have some exciting things coming up this summer. Like I said, it's my goal to support 5,000 physicians, residents, fellows, early career physicians as they take their board exams. I would love to support you. I'll say more about it. Check out my other videos. I've got plenty, and I will see you the next time.